After I got clean and my family said I was more fun on drugs, refused me a bed and laughed at my recovery online, I lived in a shelter, then got invited to speak at an event where they sat front row and watched everyone give me a standing ovation. I spotted them the second I walked onto the stage. Front row, dead center, like they owned the place. My mom with her tight smile, my dad pretending he wasn't uncomfortable, and my sister, arms crossed, looking at me like she expected a circus act. I hadn't seen them in over a year. Not since the day they told me I was more interesting on drugs. I felt my throat close. My palms were sweating. I'd practiced this speech 100 times in the mirror, in my shelter cot, in the tiny sober living bathroom where the lights flickered. But nothing prepared me for seeing them sitting there like they were proud of me, like they hadn't shoved me out when I needed them the most. The host whispered, "You're up." And suddenly the microphone was in my hand. The room was packed, local recovery workers, people from the shelter, some community members from downtown Columbus. The spotlight was hot on my face. I could feel their eyes on me, my family, the same people who once told me they'd rather house a dog than have me under their roof again. I froze for a second. My legs wanted to give out. They didn't know what I'd been through since they slammed that final door in my face. They didn't know how many nights I cried myself to sleep in that shelter, scrolling through their Instagram posts, lavish dinners, birthdays, holidays, while I ate canned soup and tried not to shake through withdrawal. And now they were here, front row, like they were about to hear some inspirational TED Talk from the child they threw away. My sister made eye contact with me. I swear she smirked. The same smirk she had the day she told me she liked me better when I was too broken to compete with her. I had never forgotten those words. They lived in my brain like a splinter. The crowd quieted. I had to start talking. But all I could think about was that last conversation with my mom. Me standing outside her house in the freezing January cold, begging for a place to stay. "Sweetie," she said, "your sister needs a stress-free home right now. You coming here would derail things. Derail things. Like I was a train wreck she didn't want on her property." The audience waited. I gripped the microphone so hard my knuckles went white. A few people nodded encouragingly from the back. My sponsor was somewhere near the aisle, giving me a small thumbs up. I took a breath that felt like it scraped against my ribs. I started, then swallowed hard. "I'm supposed to talk about recovery tonight." My mom leaned forward, like she didn't want to miss a word. My dad's eyes softened in that familiar, distant pity that always felt worse than anger. My sister looked bored already. I felt something shift inside me. An old anger, an old hurt, something I'd been shoving down ever since I got clean. Maybe I'd been waiting for this moment. Or maybe this moment had been waiting for me. "I wasn't always alone during my addiction," I said, staring straight at them. "But I became alone when I got clean." A ripple went through the room. My family stiffened, almost in sync. Good, I thought. Let them feel it. Because what they didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that I hadn't come here just to speak. I'd come here to finally tell the truth. All of it. And I was only one sentence away from the part that would blow their world open. I wasn't supposed to end up addicted to anything. At least that's what everyone said. I got good grades, stayed out of trouble, went to all the right schools in Columbus. My sister, Mia, was always the wild one. Skipped classes, dated older guys, threw parties in our parents' basement. My parents spent years trying to fix her. Meanwhile, I was the dependable one. The one they didn't worry about. But being the kid no one worries about is its own kind of invisibility. My addiction didn't start with some dramatic spiral. It started with a car accident. A real one, not a metaphor, not a lie. A guy texting at a stoplight slammed into me at 50 miles an hour. I walked away with a messed up back and a bag of prescription painkillers. Simple as that. At first I took them exactly as prescribed. Then I took them a little earlier than prescribed. Then I took 2 instead of 1. Then I crushed them because they hit faster that way. You know the rest. But what hurt me more than the drugs, more than the withdrawals, was how my family reacted when they started to notice. I didn't get concern or compassion. I got irritation, disappointment, embarrassment. like I'd personally decided to screw up their perfect suburban image. I remember the night everything started falling apart. Mia barged into my room, waving one of my pill bottles like it was a trophy she'd hunted. "Mom and Dad need to know you're using," she snapped. "You're ruining the house energy." I tried to take the bottle out of her hand, but she pulled back like I was infected. "You want attention so bad," she said. "You can't stand that I'm finally doing better than you." It was such a wild thing to say that I actually laughed. But she wasn't joking. She meant every word. And that was the start. Over the next year, every time I relapsed, Mia found a way to turn it into something about her. How my addiction made her look bad. How my struggle made her anxious. How she couldn't heal while I was falling apart. And my parents? They swallowed every word. Because Mia had always been the problem child. And now that she was suddenly stable, they clung to her like she was proof they weren't failures. Meanwhile, I spiraled. The day they kicked me out, I had been clean for 12 days. 12. I asked if I could stay, just until I found a job. My mom touched my arm like I was a stranger and said, "Sweetie, we can't do this again. We just can't." My dad kept his eyes on the floor. Mia stood behind them, arms crossed, like she was waiting to see how pathetic I'd get. My mom added, "You'd be better off in a program with people like you, people like me." So I packed a duffel bag and walked 3 miles to the shelter near Franklinton. I hid my face the first few nights, terrified someone I knew would see me. I went through withdrawals alone. I shook until my bones felt like they'd crack. I went to meetings at the church down the block because they had free coffee and I needed something warm to hold. I kept expecting my family to call. They never did. But they posted. Oh, they posted constantly. Dinners at upscale places in Short North. Weekend trips to Cincinnati. Family game nights. New furniture. All curated smiles and warm lighting. The kind that made you believe they were wholesome, supportive, loving. And in the captions? Little digs. Finally a peaceful home. So grateful for stability. Once Mia posted a meme. Recovery is just another word for attention-seeking. She added a laughing emoji. I stopped checking after that. But I never forgot. Especially because of what I eventually learned about why they pushed me out. Something I didn't discover until much, much later. Life in the shelter forced me to grow up in ways I didn't expect. Not the dramatic kind of grow up, but the slow, grinding kind where you learn how small you can become before you disappear completely. Every morning I woke up to the same sounds. Metal bunk frames, someone coughing in the hallway, the volunteers rolling out the breakfast cart. Everything smelled faintly like bleach and damp coats. I kept my head down, kept to myself, did my chores, went to meetings, and told everyone I was fine even when I wasn't. The thing that saved me, ironically, was routine. I needed it like oxygen. I got used to the ache of being forgotten. I got used to being invisible. I even got used to watching families walk past the shelter doors without looking inside. What I didn't get used to was the feeling that my own family was out there laughing without me on purpose. One night, about 3 months into sobriety, I was sitting on my cot writing in my little notebook they gave us in group therapy. That's when one of the volunteers, a guy named Mark who ran workshops, sat beside me and asked if I'd be willing to share my story at a small event. "Just talk for 10 minutes, he said. "You've got a way of making people listen." I wanted to say no. I didn't feel inspiring. I felt like someone standing next to the ruins of their own life. But I said yes, mostly because it felt like the first time anyone believed I had something worth hearing. 10 minutes turned into 20. That event turned into another one. Then a church invited me to speak. Then a local outreach program asked if I'd help train new volunteers. People started telling me I had a voice that made recovery feel real instead of sugar-coated. For the first time in years, I felt like I mattered. During all this, my family kept living their curated, polished lives. I didn't hear from them. I didn't expect to. I figured I'd spend the rest of my life rebuilding myself alone. Then one afternoon, this was almost a year into sobriety, I received an email from a woman named Sharon who ran a big community mental health conference in downtown Columbus. A legit one. She'd seen one of my talks online and wanted me to give the opening speech at their annual event. I stared at the email for 10 straight minutes. Me? On a real stage. A year earlier, I couldn't stand upright without leaning on a wall. I said yes so fast I barely read the rest. 2 weeks later, while the event was being advertised around the city, I got a text from an unknown number. Proud of you. Just that. Nothing else. I stared at it and felt my stomach drop. It was my mom. I didn't know how she got my new number. I didn't respond. The next day, another text. We should talk. Then, we'll be at your event. Not can we come? Not would it be okay. Just a declaration. Like they were entitled to show up. My hands shook. Anger rose up hot and sharp. They hadn't spoken to me in almost a year. They didn't call when I was sick, when I got a part-time job, when I hit 100 days sober. Nothing. But now that I was on a stage, now they wanted in. I almost refused to go to the event. I almost backed out. But something in me, something bruised and stubborn, said no. You earned this. Don't let them take it. But what I didn't know then was that their sudden interest wasn't random. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't reconciliation. There was a reason they showed up. A reason they sat front row. A reason they suddenly cared about my success. A reason that had nothing to do with love. And everything to do with what they'd done behind my back. When I walked off the stage after rehearsing my speech the night before the event, Sharon, the organizer, caught up to me with a thick envelope in her hands. She looked stressed, the kind of stressed that made my stomach clench before she even opened her mouth. Hey, she said softly. We need to talk for a minute. Privately. My heart thudded. I followed her into a small conference room with those cheap stackable chairs and humming fluorescent lights. She shut the door and handed me the envelope. These came in yesterday, she said. We get background documents for all our speakers. Just routine vetting. But your file had additions. Additions? I opened the envelope, expecting maybe old medical records or something from the shelter. Instead, the first thing I saw was a printed email. A long one. And the second thing I noticed was the sender. Mia. My sister. My hands went cold so fast it felt like the blood drained out of me. The subject line, urgent. Concerns about your keynote speaker. I read the message once. Then again. Then a third time because my brain refused to accept that the words were real. She'd sent them everything she could find or invent to make me look unstable. She wrote that I was still actively using. She wrote that I was manipulative and emotionally dangerous. She wrote that I was seeking attention through fake recovery. She even claimed I'd stolen from the family over the years money, jewelry, medications. None of it true. But the part that made me physically sway was this line. We cannot stop them from speaking, but we worry they may ruin the event or embarrass your organization. Please reconsider. We, not I, we, meaning my entire family had signed off on this. They had tried to get me removed. It felt like a punch to the ribcage. A fresh betrayal layered on the old ones. Sharon watched my face carefully. I wanted you to see this, she said, because we didn't believe it. We verified your references, your sobriety records, your shelter program. Everything checks out. You're good. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. My throat felt thick and hot. Unfortunately, she continued, lowering her voice, your family also contacted some of our donors. We can't control that. They might show up tomorrow. I just didn't want you blindsided. Blindsided. I sat down because my knees wouldn't hold me up anymore. I thought about every night I stared at their Instagram posts while I shivered in a shelter bed. I thought about the memes they shared mocking recovery. I thought about Mia saying she liked me better when I was too broken to compete. Now it made sense. That email wasn't new behavior. It was the logical extension of who they had always been. I felt numb, then furious, then numb again, like waves hitting a wall. Why would they do this? I finally whispered. Sharon didn't answer. She looked like she wanted to hug me but didn't want to overstep. I folded the email back into the envelope with shaking hands. My whole body felt electric and hollow at the same time. My family didn't just abandon me. They tried to erase me. And yet there they were, front row, watching me like I was some project they could claim credit for. Seeing them out there 24 hours later made everything in that envelope burn under my skin. My sister wearing a designer coat. My mom beaming like she'd personally nurtured me through every hardship. My dad nodding proudly. Proud. They weren't proud of me. They were proud of what they thought they'd gotten away with. Because the truth, the real truth, the one I hadn't told anyone yet, was this: they didn't kick me out because they were overwhelmed. They didn't leave me in a shelter because they ran out of options. The real reason was darker, colder, crueler than anything I had imagined back then. And I was only days away from discovering it. I barely slept the night before the event. I kept seeing that email in my head. My sister's words printed in black ink. My parents co-signing every lie. I lay awake in my tiny sober living room, staring at the ceiling, feeling the kind of anger that doesn't burn hot but slow, like coals under skin. They didn't just try to sabotage my speech. They tried to bury me before I even got a chance to stand up. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I sat up and turned on the desk lamp. The room glowed in that cheap yellow light, and something inside me clicked into place. Not revenge. Not yet. Something colder. Something sharper. Clarity. I pulled the envelope from my backpack and spread the pages across the desk. Each sentence my sister wrote felt like a small blade. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stared at the evidence of what my own family thought I deserved. Then I opened my notebook and started planning. If they wanted to show up and take credit for my recovery, fine. Let them sit in the front row. Let them smile and clap and pretend they supported me. But I wasn't going to let them hijack my story. Not anymore. I wrote out my speech again, rewriting entire sections. I changed the pacing. I changed the emotional beats. I added things I hadn't dared to say publicly. Things about abandonment, about cruelty masquerading as boundaries, about the kind of loneliness that eats at your bones. But I didn't mention them by name. Not yet. Real revenge isn't loud. It's surgical. It's letting someone walk straight into the hit you've spent months, years, preparing. By sunrise, I had a plan. A real one. Step 1, stay calm. Step 2, stick to the revised speech until the final 3 minutes. Step 3, use their presence against them. Step 4, reveal the truth only when I was ready. Step 5, make sure it couldn't be twisted, denied, or rewritten later. And step 6, the part 1 didn't write down, was the part still forming in the back of my mind, heavy and cold. Because that envelope wasn't the end of the betrayal. It was the beginning. Around 10 a.m. the day of the event, I met with Sharon again to go over logistics. She kept asking if I was okay, giving me that worried tilt of the head people use when they don't want to say, "You look like hell." I told her I was fine. I wasn't. When I slipped away to the restroom before going on stage, I pulled out my phone and opened a folder I had been avoiding for months. Screenshots, messages, photos, evidence. I'd saved everything from the months before they kicked me out. Every text, every voicemail, even the bank notifications showing withdrawals I hadn't made. I didn't know back then why I kept them. Now I did. I scrolled through them slowly, letting each memory hit. And that's when I realized something that made my hands tremble. My family hadn't just lied about me to protect their image. They had lied to hide something they'd done. Something big. Something that involved me, but not in the way I'd thought. I felt my stomach twist as the pieces slid together. They weren't ashamed of me. They were afraid of me remembering. And in that moment, I knew part of my speech had to change again. Not to attack them. Not to expose every detail. Not yet. But to force them into a corner where they couldn't run from what they'd done. To make them panic. To make them sweat. To make them slip. That was how I'd get the rest of the truth. That was how I'd take my power back. So when I walked onto that stage and saw them sitting there, front row, dressed sharp, smiling like VIP guests, they had no idea the trap they were already in. And they had no idea what I was about to find out next. Because the second twist was coming. And it would change everything I thought I knew about why they threw me away. I always thought the worst thing my family did was abandon me. Or maybe laugh about my recovery online. Or maybe try to get me removed from the event. But I was wrong. Those were just surface wounds compared to what I discovered next. It happened minutes before I stepped onto the stage. I'd gone backstage to get a glass of water. My hands were cold, my pulse too fast, but my head was clear. I kept telling myself, stick to the plan. Stay in control. I could hear people filing into the auditorium. Someone was testing the microphone. My name echoed once, twice through the speakers. Then I heard something else. My sister's voice. She was behind the curtain in the staff hallway, talking on the phone. Not whispering. Not even trying to be discreet. Her tone was sharp, annoyed, like she was handling an inconvenience. I froze. I'm telling you, she said. If they bring it up on stage, we're screwed. Like actually screwed. If the committee finds out, they'll investigate, and then everything falls apart. My stomach clenched. She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end, then said, Mom is freaking out. Dad said we should have deleted the account earlier. But I didn't think they'd ever dig into it. They were too messed up back then to connect the dots. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. She wasn't talking about my addiction. She was talking about something else. Something they did while I was using. Something they assumed I was too out of it to remember. I edged closer, staying hidden behind the curtain. We had to take the money, Mia continued. We didn't have a choice. I don't regret it, but the timing was bad. And making it look like they did it was the only way out. My breath caught. Money? Made it look like I did it? A cold wave of realization washed over me. It hit all at once. Memories I'd shoved down because they didn't make sense back then. The mysterious overdraft my bank accused me of. The withdrawal slips dated during weekends I was blacked out. The way my parents reacted. Anger first, then disappointment, then silence. I had tried to tell them I didn't take anything, but Mia insisted I had. My parents believed her instantly. I thought it was my fault. I thought I actually stole during a blackout. I thought it was just another thing addiction took from me. But now I understood. They framed me, they stole from me, and they let me think I'd destroyed my own finances. My sister kept talking. Look, the only problem is that now they're like a public figure or something. If they talk about the eviction or the bank stuff, people might dig. And if they dig, they're gonna see the phone records, the cameras, everything. Everything. I felt dizzy. My hand tightened around the edge of the curtain. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a desperate boundary. This wasn't them being overwhelmed. It was intentional. They didn't kick me out because I was using. They kicked me out because it was convenient. Because I was the perfect scapegoat. Because no one would believe an addict over a stable family. And the worst part? I had been blaming myself for years. I leaned back against the wall, my heart pounding in a dull, steady thud. Everything inside me felt like it was shifting. Like I wasn't the version of myself who walked into this building 20 minutes ago. I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I was clear. Clear in a way I hadn't been in years. My family hadn't just abandoned me. They'd used me. They'd stolen from me. They'd rewritten the story of what happened, and counted on me being too broken to ever uncover the truth. But now I had it. And when I walked onto that stage a minute later, I knew exactly what the final part of my revenge would look like. Not loud. Not messy. Not screaming. Cold. Surgical. Public. And impossible for them to outrun. When I walked onto that stage, I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't even angry in the way I used to be. Hot. Frantic. Confused. What I felt now was colder. Sharper. A kind of stillness that comes only when the truth finally clicks into place. I looked at my family in the front row. My mom's hands were folded neatly in her lap, her pearl bracelet catching the stage light. My dad's posture was straight, rigid, like he was trying to look respectable for the cameras. Mia sat between them, scrolling her phone casually, as if she hadn't just admitted to a crime in the hallway. And as I stood there, the horrifying reason behind everything they'd done finally settled into place with absolute clarity. They didn't throw me out to set boundaries. They didn't distance themselves because they were emotionally exhausted. They didn't mock my recovery because they were clueless or cruel in the casual way families sometimes are. They erased me to protect themselves. The real reason was money. Not a little money. Not pocket change. Not borrowed cash. It was the trust fund my grandfather left me. The one I wasn't supposed to access until I turned 30 unless it was for education or medical emergencies. My parents were listed as temporary custodians. Custodians, not beneficiaries. They weren't supposed to touch it, but they did. Mia's slip in the hallway replayed in my mind, each word sinking deeper. We had to take the money. The timing was bad. Making it look like they did it was the only way out. They weren't scared of my addiction. They were scared of me getting clean, because a sober version of me could ask questions, could trace withdrawals, could call lawyers, could check dates and signatures, could remember things clearly. Addiction made me useful. Recovery made me dangerous. So they acted fast. They took money from the trust over several months, tens of thousands, and then timed the withdrawals during weekends when I was at my worst. Days I couldn't remember clearly. Days I slept for 18 hours straight or couldn't hold a fork without shaking. They counted on the fact that no one believes an addict over a concerned family. They counted on my own shame swallowing the details. When the bank flagged suspicious withdrawals, my sister stepped in like she was performing in a play she'd memorized since childhood. "She's been stealing from us," she told the banker. "She's using again. We're worried about her." My parents nodded, devastated but noble. It was perfect. A scapegoat who couldn't defend themselves. A narrative no one questioned. A cleanup job that turned me into the villain of my own story. And when the bank called me, I was so deep in withdrawal that I believed them. I believed I did it. I apologized. I sobbed. I begged them not to press charges. My family stood there the whole time watching me take the blame for something they did. The eviction wasn't because they were overwhelmed. It was because I was becoming inconvenient, a liability, possible witness. They pushed me into the shelter because the farther away I was, the safer they felt. And when I started rebuilding my life, when my name started appearing in local programs and community newsletters, they panicked. Their biggest fear wasn't losing me. Their biggest fear was losing control of the story. And sitting here now, staring at them under the stage lights, I finally understood the full, chilling truth. They didn't want me dead. They wanted me discredited, erased, silenced, forever stuck in a version of myself that made their crimes invisible. My mom blinked up at me, smiling proudly like she was waiting for her shout-out. My dad nodded like he deserved part of this moment. Mia looked bored until I met her eyes. Then something flickered. Fear. She could tell I knew. And for the first time in my life, they were the vulnerable ones. They were the ones who had something to lose. And I was about to take everything back. When I finally stepped up to the microphone, the room softened into silence. The lights were bright enough that I couldn't see the edges of the crowd anymore. Just the first few rows. Just them. My family. The people who built their comfort out of my collapse. I took a breath. My heart was steady. My hands didn't shake. "My name is," I said, then paused. "And I'm a year and 4 months sober." The room clapped. My family clapped too. My mom even teared up on cue. I kept going, sticking to the speech I rehearsed. My story, my addiction, the nights in the shelter, the steps I took to rebuild myself. The audience listened closely, nodding, reacting to each beat. But the last 3 minutes, those were mine. My revenge, delivered slowly, calmly, and with surgical precision. "I used to think my lowest point was my addiction," I said. "But it wasn't. My lowest point was believing the people who told me I wasn't worth saving." The room went still. My parents stiffened. "I wasn't alone during my addiction," I continued. "I had a family who told me I was more interesting on drugs. A family who said they'd rather house a dog than house me. A family who mocked recovery as just another phase." A murmur moved through the audience. Soft, disturbed. "But what hurt the most," I said, locking eyes with Mia, "was discovering that the people I trusted weren't just distant. They were deliberately sabotaging me." Mia's mouth fell open. My mom reached for her hand. My dad sat frozen, jaw tight. "I didn't name them. I didn't need to. I recently learned," I said, my voice steady. That while I was sick, certain people used my condition as a cover. They stole money that didn't belong to them and made it look like I did it. They framed me. They abandoned me to protect themselves. And they assumed I'd never get clean enough to understand what actually happened. A ripple of shock moved through the room. Sharp, electric. My sister's face drained. My mother shook her head, tiny and frantic, as if she could undo every word by disagreeing silently. My dad whispered something to her, his hand gripping her knee. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't break. I want to say something to the people who did that to me, I continued. Not out of anger, out of clarity. The room leaned in. I remember now. Mia swallowed hard. My mom covered her mouth. My dad stared straight ahead like a man hearing his sentence. And I have proof. The crowd erupted, gasps, whispers, people turning to look at my family. I didn't elaborate. I didn't throw accusations. I didn't need to drag every detail into the open. I'd laid the groundwork. I'd exposed enough to make the right people ask questions. People with authority. People who would dig. And thanks to the email they sent to the organizers trying to get me removed, I knew exactly who to give my documentation to: donors, advocates, members of the community who took financial misconduct seriously. My revenge wasn't a scene. It was a process, and it had already begun. I closed my speech with a calm breath. I'm not telling this to get sympathy, I said. I'm telling it because people like me get blamed for things we didn't do all the time. And sometimes the ones doing the blaming are the ones doing the harm. The applause wasn't immediate. It started slow, then grew, rolling through the auditorium like a wave. Loud, fierce, real. My family didn't clap. They stood up quietly and slipped out of the front row, trying to avoid the eyes now following them. My sister kept her head down. My mom wiped tears that weren't for me. My dad walked stiffly, already calculating damage control. They left the building while people lined up to shake my hand. That night, I went home to my small, sober living room, sat on my bed, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because I'd hurt them, but because they couldn't hurt me anymore. And because the truth finally belonged to me. Kicker. They wanted me broken because it made their lies safe. But I got clean, and that's the one thing they never planned for.